Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 104 of Podcast vs. Enemies, a Destiny Massive Breakdown show. My name is Court, and today I'm joined by the usual fire team trifecta, Impetus and Saint. This week we've got a shorter episode, I say that in quotes, but before we get into that, Saint, how are you doing?
I am doing good. I'm very happy to be done with school for the semester. I'm happy to say that I got A's in both my game design and my programming for game design classes, which feels good after a long semester of just school and work and all that stuff. So it's summer, and I don't think I've felt this excited about it's summer in like a decade, which is great. Looking forward to playing a lot of Destiny, getting ready for the final shape and going through Pantheon over the next month or so leading up to that. Speaking of which, did just yesterday finally got a chance to sit down and go through this second week of Pantheon, which is definitely a little bit of a step up, kind of change the strategies around from last week. And you could feel that extra level deficit just a little bit in some of the fights. Luckily, I had a few teammates that had already been through that Atrax fight, so they kind of guided us through on how to make sure that we were hitting that point threshold. And then going through the actual Oryx fight was not bad at all. I think that we just got that first try, just kind of cruised on through that. It probably took us around an hour for the whole thing. But yeah, enjoying that so far and looking forward to seeing what new modifiers they're cooking up next week as we go for the last 2 weeks here, which I believe... looking at the title, I believe it's going to take 4 weeks to get the title, and then the last week will just be kind of a recap of everything that's happened so far. Impetus, how about you, man? How you doing?
I'm tired, boss. I've been getting up early today to do Pantheon. We got our fire team's a little bit spread out across the world, so we gotta line up schedules and stuff. So that required me getting up at 9 a.m. But it was good. It felt nice to grab a cup of coffee and start slaying out. We didn't have too much trouble, did we, Court? I mean, Atrax was a problem, I think, just because of the damage window being a bit finicky, but I think we had a pretty similar situation to you, Saint, where Oryx wasn't too much trouble. We wiped once just because we didn't kill the 2 shades in the Thunderdome quick enough. They would kind of show up outside of the playable area, and I think we were kind of waiting for them to come in to like really start doing damage, and that ended up taking too much time and we wiped. But yeah, we were using Whisper and had a very comfortable... I mean, it was really like a 1.5 phase. We got a lot of his health chunked down that very first time. But yeah, it is definitely starting to get slowly but surely a little bit harder. Kind of looking forward to next week. That's gonna be Rulk. Can't wait to see where the Tormentor shows up, because that seems to be the theme now, is we just get Tormentors at some point in the encounter. So maybe we get it during damage, maybe we get it during the symbol reading. We'll find out. That of course that final week we get to see a Tormentor in Riven of all places, as well as Nezerax. So yeah, and then outside of Pantheon, I did also get Heritage and Defiance of Yasmin finally unlocked for crafting, so that felt good. Nice. I'm also at like 228 spoils, so next week I will finally be able to buy Taraba from the exotic kiosk, and that will be all of the exotic weapons unlocked at this point. So looking forward to that, and then just bounty prep has been the other stuff I've been doing this week, getting ready for the final shape in the most boring but helpful way possible. Court, how about yourself?
Yeah, much the same. Did Pantheon today with Impetus and the lads, and I think I thought we'd maybe have some problems with planets. That's normally the kind of brick wall when it comes to kind of team alignment, keeping the communications on top and doing damage. It's just a lot going on with that encounter, but we did that very swiftly. Like, there was not much, if any, problems. But yeah, that Atrax encounter, we were in there for a while, but I think it was just because of jank, just a lot of kind of weirdness. We missed the 500,000, which you need for the quote high score. It's not just a case of getting platinum. You need to get 500,000 as well as platinum if you want that. But I'm looking forward to it. I have been enjoying it. I thought, I was going into Pantheon a little bit kind of underwhelmed. Just thinking, what are they really going to do with these encounters? Because they've shown in the past that they're not always that keen to change up these encounters. But, even though, people are pointing out there's a lot of tormentors happening, which can be a bit annoying. But the actual other encounter changes, seeing that big spinning cyclone, the fire tornado in planets. The last 2 weeks will be very interesting how hard those hit, but it's been fun kind of dancing around that. So these kind of small changes are very appreciated. Outside of that, just more onslaughting and just doing more infographic stuff in the background as we approach the final shape. We are, by the time this episode goes out, it'll be 3 weeks until the final shape.
Goodness.
Yeah. Impetus, who do we have to thank this week?
We've got our usual sponsors, Askin Monk. I'm K Rose in this moment. Thank you so much for your level of support, going above and beyond in that. We really appreciate that, helping keep the lights on here for the podcast. Additionally, you can send us all kinds of feedback directly to any of our socials or via the Destiny Massive Breakdowns Discord server. All kinds of feedback help with the trajectory of the podcast and how we present and break down builds and activities, which, hey, we might be doing that this week. And of course, so much more in the PvE sandbox for all kinds of Destiny players. We do also want to extend a special thanks and appreciation to everyone that does support the show, whether that is downloading and listening or discussing it on social media in our Discord server, or of course supporting us via Patreon. And speaking of Patreon, if you would like to support the show, please visit destinymassivebreakdowns.com and click on the link to Patreon. You'll get access to member-only channels in Discord, behind-the-scenes content like episode previews, as well as a chance to have input provided on the future of the show. All right, Sam, what are we talking about today?
We're going to be talking a little bit about the prep, kind of looking back on the year. There's some stuff that has all gone basically free to play, including a lot of weapons that you can craft or craft very easily if you haven't from this past year, and other stuff that you probably are going to want to lock down before you go into the final shape from this past year. And then we're going to be talking a little bit about Legend Onslaught builds that we have been using, in normal and in Legend mode, what we've been enjoying, and fun stuff, meta stuff, all that kind of stuff. Looking forward to talking about that, but let's just jump right in here and start talking about weapons. So in case you have missed this announcement, every day until June 3rd, or basically every day until the final shape releases, players are guaranteed a deep sight weapon upon completing a seasonal activity on a knockout system for any weapons that you do not have all of the red waters for. For Season of Defiance, Season 20 weapons, you can do Defiant Battlegrounds or the Excalibur mission. For Season 21, Season of the Deep, you can do Deep Dives and Salvage. And then Season 22, Season of the Witch, you can do Summoning Pools and Seventh Spire. And then Season of the Wish, of course, Ribbon's Lair and Coil runs will also guarantee that. So completing any of those activities, even the shorter ones, I should say, like Summoning Pools and Ribbon's Lair, will pretty much guarantee that every day you're getting red borders that you're missing. So really easy to round those out. Kind of just looking back at some weapons that you're probably going to want to pick up from these sets. You've got Prodigal Return, which is a craftable energy GL with disorienting grenades, which it's always good to have one of those in your vault if you do not have one. Iterative Loop is a Neomuna weapon, but good, just relative all-arounder fusion rifle. You've got Until Its Return, which is a great shotgun if you are a Banner of War Titan. The Eremite from Season 22, which is great for damage, solar mod synergy on a few weapons there, is really nice for total damage output on a high impact fusion, as well as Semiotician, which is, it's pretty much the only strand rocket launcher that you're going to want to use. And then from this season, we have Scatter Signal, another good damage fusion rifle, rapid fire in that top slot. And then a pittance, that Stasis Trace Rifle, which is just generally got some good perks on there, especially if you're wearing a certain aircraft carrier style helmet. could be incredibly useful there. Cord, what else we got from this kind of past year that we're going to want to lock down on our way into the final shape?
Yeah, so we've had quite a lot of just weapons kind of all over the place. We've talked about Warlord's Ruin. I think a lot of those loot drops we've not been kind towards, except two of them, one of which is the exotic, that's Buried Bloodline, which is the sidearm, kind of rocket assisted sidearm. We'll talk a little bit more of that when we come to Onslaught, but it's not currently farmable. It won't be farmable until Warlord's Ruin goes into the rotation, but you can get 3 chances per week, and also if you do the dungeon triumphs to get the extra chance to get that to drop, very solid weapon in your middle slot. Another one, if you can't get Buried Bloodline, you can get Indebted Kindness, and you can, right now, you can farm it. It's in the first encounter, which is the easiest by far. Very efficient, very fast encounter to farm, and we've talked about it. We've gushed about Indebted Kindness, so that is your go-to. We do have 2 more rocket sidearms coming in the final shape. We're not entirely sure where they'll drop. We know it's a Strand and a Solar one, but to go into the final shape, you do want to get an Indebted Kindness, and ideally a Volt Shot roll. Over on the other dungeon that released during the year of Lightfall, we've got Ghosts of the Deep. There's a few weapons in here, a lot more favourable compared to Warlord's Ruin. You've got Cold Comfort, which drops in characters 1, 2, and 3. New Pacific Epitaph, which is the wave frame, which is in characters 1 and 3. And No Survivors, which is our solar SMG. That's in characters 1 and 2. No Survivors, I know Impetus and we were doing a little bit of farming a few weeks ago. It's maybe the more tricky one to get, because it falls in the first encounter, which is it's not great for farming, but the second counter is the easiest to farm. And I say that with quotation marks, because it's still a little bit of a faff to farm in there. It can be a little bit long, and if you don't get the one phase, it can draw out. But yeah, No Survivors, a New Pacific Epitaph, and Cold Comfort, definitely the ones that you want to aim for. Unfortunately, Ghosts of the Deep will no longer be showing up on the rotation before the final shape launches. That's unless Bungie manually changes it, and they do like 2 weeks or 1 week of here's all the dungeons and raids that you can just go in and farm. Maybe we might see more of that. I mean, I wasn't expecting all these weapons to get red boxes that you can go in and just farm them every day. Did they do that last year, lads? I can't remember, for the seasonal weapons.
Yeah, I think they had a similar thing, because I remember catching up on a few that I had just not really prioritized. But always nice to be able to go, grind out those red borders just in case, because that's just one less weapon that I have to hoard in my vault. I can just keep the red borders, and if that archetype ever sees some serious buffs, hop back over to it.
All right. Crota's End came out during the year of Lightfall. We had that as a free raid, so you don't need to do anything. You can just go in and do some of that. So we're recommending Song of Urut, which is encounters 1 and 3, Word of Crota, which is 3 and 4, and Swordbreaker for 2 and 4. Swordbreaker for more Banner of War kind of cheekiness, some meta-defining weirdness with the Banner of War. Impetus. Next up, we have Last Wish.
Yes, Last Wish is actually now free. That's part of one of the big announcements, is that a lot of those previous expansions, actually it's all of the previous expansions, are now free to play and to, I guess, purchase. Technically, your purchase will stick around, is what I mean. So you can go get these weapons. It's also kind of the reason why I'm stumbling over my words here. We do have in Season of the Wish the special quest line that you can do from Mara, where you get your wish tokens, and you can also purchase Last Wish weapons, the red boxes, specifically if you spend wish tokens, your wish tokens on them. So our recommendations as far as that loot pool would be Apex Predator, number 1 rocket, arguably the number 1 rocket, because it is craftable. Going to be very, very strong. It's solar, it's adaptive, just top tier perk pool, and then a top tier rocket frame. But a close second would also be the Supremacy, probably one of the better legendary options in the kinetic slot for long range, for applying kinetic tremor damage, also just doing a lot of burst damage, being a rapid fire sniper rifle. So those would be kind of the top two options there. Some of the primaries are fine, but really it'd be Apex and the Supremacy are the top of the line weapons that if you can go and grab 5 red borders or any remaining red borders for those if you can. We did also get a refresh to the Prophecy Dungeon, which has been free and continues to remain free, but we're bringing this up again because those weapons that came with the refresh will have enhanceable traits in the final shape. So if you lock up some solid rolls here, once the final shape launches, you'll be able to go down to the Enclave and actually enhance those weapons, those randomly rolled droppable weapons. And there are some outstanding perk combinations. We're not going to go through all of them. Again, it's a lot of primary weapons, and I think that will probably remain to be seen what changes are coming to primary weapons, any buffs, any nerfs. So we'll keep an eye out on news. But again, if there are any buffs to, say, pulse rifles, because there are 2 pulse rifles in the Prophecy pool, we'll make sure to give those a shout. But yes, there are definitely some strong options there in the refresh version of Prophecy. And then, of course, we do have our Brave Arsenal here with Into the Light. These weapons are also going to be enhanceable in the final shape. We've been mentioning them in our most recent episodes, but definitely kind of the top of the line here are the grenade launchers, Mountaintop, and Edge Transit. Really, really desirable weapons for PvE. Edge Transit looks like it's basically the king of heavy grenade launchers, legendary heavy grenade launchers going into the final shape. Mountaintop, of course, is the Mountaintop. Midnight Coup, Luna's Howl, again, top tier hand cannons in different slots, bring a lot to the table there. Should be very, very solid going into the final shape. Again, we don't know what kind of changes might be happening with hand cannons, but if there are any buffs, those two stand to gain a lot just because of how solid they are all around. And then if you don't have the time to go into the Deepstone Crypt, Vow of the Disciple raids, you do have a shot at Succession and or Forbearance Into the Light and playing Onslaught. So that would be nice to grab a roll of those if you do not already have access to them or don't want to go and unlock them for crafting in their respective raids. Otherwise, don't focus these. So those are kind of our legendary weapons that we feel like are of note and want to bring to your attention here. We do also have seasonal exotics that did debut, just kind of as a reminder of which of those 4 are kind of worth your time. Go grind out those catalysts, make sure that they're ready to go heading into the final shape. Definitely Dragon's Breath. That's this season's exotic, seasonal exotic. That looks to be very strong. That catalyst quest is dropping from the Gunsmith. Very, very, very strong rocket launcher. Kind of a surprise how strong it is, but really great for solo play. And then the Wicked Implement, which is our Season of the Deep seasonal exotic. That's actually dropping from the exotic mission, I should say. It's not necessarily our seasonal exotic as in from the reward track, but that catalyst, well, the base weapon is a little bit challenging to get. So, we're giving you a heads up now just so you have plenty of time to get a competent fire team together to go and knock that out. The catalyst needs to be unlocked via a tier 7 deep dive, so that also takes some time and planning and effort to unlock as well, but that is a very, very solid stasis primary exotic weapon that does synergize quite well with our current suite of stasis builds, and I imagine will be even stronger with Prismatic in the final shape to really tie into generating stasis shards, linking into anything else. So Dragon's Breath, Wicked Implement are the 2 seasonal exotics really want to tie into out of the exotics. And then, are there any other legendaries that you guys have really fallen in love with here that we didn't mention on the list that maybe aren't for everyone, but you have a specific use case that you've really enjoyed?
I've used Tusk of the Boar quite a bit, but I still think that Scatter Signal is what I keep coming back to, It's just so good, man.
Yeah, I was going to mention Tusk of the Boar, but we didn't put that in the episode script here because Iron Banner was a couple of weeks ago now. So if you don't already have a Tusk of the Boar, then that's what you've got for at least until Iron Banner comes back during the new year. Also, Warden's Law is a shout, but again, it's not going to show up in the GM rotation unless they do some weird, here's all the weapons, you can try and like focus on, but I don't think they'll do anything crazy for Nightfalls. But in terms of this year, in terms of the year of Nightfall and all the seasonal content, I think pretty much listed all of them. Obviously, there's a lot of weapons we've been using over the last couple of years, from Witch Queen, and then before that with Beyond Light, a lot of weapons since then, you know. But that's our highlights for this year.
Yeah, I would give a shout out to Breakneck with like kinetic trimmers / Onslaught. Feels pretty good. And then Rosarago for sure, which those, you know, Rosarago is going to be probably one of the harder weapons to just go get a great roll on. But man, does the Onslaught Rosarago just absolutely shred. Really, really enjoy using that thing.
Same with Crux Termination. If you can get that World Drop Arc rocket launcher, that's one of the best frames as well. If you can get those to roll, but you know, you're praying to the RNG gods for that.
And then I believe wasn't Randy's throwing knife this year too?
It was Season of the Deep.
Yeah, that can roll. There's a really interesting combo on there of under, over, and kinetic trimmers, which if we ever, you know, we're back in like a anti-barrier scout, you know, artifact or something like that, that thing would absolutely shred. And given that it's the highest rate of fire archetype for scout rifles, it triggers kinetic trimmers the fastest. And that's just kind of nice. So if you're a scout rifle guy, you know, make sure you go pick up a good Randy's throwing knife with kinetic trimmers, and ideally with under, over, in case we ever get a anti-barrier scout back on the artifact.
I think with the dev builds now, this might not be representative of what's happening in the final shape. I think it was Pulse Rifle Barrier, and I think it was Unstoppable Sidearm. Is the two ones I noticed anyway.
Okay.
I don't know if you guys noticed.
Oh, and there's like little gameplay clips.
The prismatic stuff. We aren't talking about like theory crafting for prismatics. I think all three of us, we just want to wait until we get our hands on it, and then we can go absolutely crazy. But during those three, the Hunter, Titan, and Warlock prismatic kind of little sneak peeks into all the fancy stuff we'll be able to do. I think I clocked anti-barrier pulse rifle and unstoppable sidearm, but again, that might not be representative of what we'll see in the final shape. That's just probably just some dev stuff that they're doing.
Yeah. Hey, if so, blast furnace, you know, could be eaten good. It's got plenty of, I feel like, good combos there. I mean, you know, even just against champions, something like, you know, Frenzy and kinetic trimmers would be great.
That's a weird way to say crafted, outbreak, perfected there, Saint.
Oh yeah, that's true. Coming up on Tuesday. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh man. Yeah, I've seen some conjecture about rewind rounds and how that's going to work on Outbreak. And if the stuff that I've seen, I think it was Hugo that was talking about this, who is a, you know, Destiny analytics guy. If his theory about how the rewind rounds on Outbreak is going to work is correct, when the nanites can trigger it, oh, good God, that is going to be really, really nice.
It's going to be disabled on day one.
Yeah.
That's what that's going to be.
Yeah, 0 hour 2. Just what a cool mission. You know, what a cool piece of Destiny content. If you've never played that, you should be very excited to go give that a run, and you should definitely be even if that means you got to go to some in-game LFG Fire Team Finder, do it. It's very worth it. It's not only is it a great weapon, but it's a really cool mission.
They're probably listening to this podcast episode while they're running from Trevor, actually. Now that I think about it, so.
All right, well, let's get
into Onslaught, dude.
Yeah,
let's talk about those builds. It's been a while since we've had an activity, I think, that's kind of pushed some build crafting when it comes to loadouts. You definitely do need to play a little bit differently. This is not quite as simple as just have fun, bring whatever you want in. You are going to be pushed once you get to that wave 30. Definitely once you get to wave 40. Those those sky bombers are not messing around. They are quite annoying. So, before we kind of get into our individual classes, what are like some general heavy hitting exotic weapons that will shine quite well that we've had some success with, that we've seen others have success with?
Yeah, in the kinetic slot, we've got a few go-tos. Osseous Striga, go-to SMG, and then you've got Wither Horde for just crowd control, area control. Your Scepter for some stasis builds, another good crowd control option there. Definitely some Warlock builds that really synergize well with that. I'd also shout out Forerunner as a option. Not something that I use constantly, but it's something that I have almost on me almost all the time, no matter what build I'm using, so that I can swap over it and deal some quick Tormentor damage because of the ammo economy on that thing. Moving over to the energy slot, Sunshot, Graviton, Buried Bloodline, all just incredibly strong. I feel like this is honestly what has really brought Buried Bloodlines and the Indebted Kindness popularity way up, right? Which has been awesome to see. And then I would also, moving over to heavy, we've got Levy's Breath, Xenophage, 1KV, Eyes of Tomorrow, which sounds funny, but man, if you can manage to keep that thing running on ammo refreshes, it's insanely strong. I don't know. I'm pretty sure I know who wrote Queenbreaker in here. That's fine. And then lastly, just galley and rocket spam. If you're going to be able to keep that going with something like Cenotaph or Aeons, just incredibly strong for wiping out waves of enemies still. We'll jump into some more class-specific stuff, and we'll have more info on these builds. We can try to have a lot of this info linked in various screenshots and stuff like that in not only the Discord server, but also the description of this episode. So if you're listening to us talk about all these builds and stuff like that, and you want to remember what we were talking about, we'll have links over to the server and some info in the description for refreshers on everything that we mention here. So first up, let's go to our Hunter Specialist, Court. What are some builds that you've been running? What are you having fun with in Onslaught?
Well, I'll kick us off what perhaps my favorite elemental class for Hunters is Arc. Especially because it's not just because I'm running Queensbreaker, because I will swap that out for other things, but we'll get to that. So Arc, we've got you can either go Arc Staff. Arc Staff's actually really good against anything that's not explosive in the kind of early in the mid to late rounds. But Gathering Storm you will want to swap to if you're using that in the boss environments. Arc Bolt for one particular reason, because we'll be using it with Lucky Raspberry. Lucky Raspberry thrives in kind of heavier targets. If you can keep if you can keep triggering that jolt, you'll get your Arc Bolt back faster. It's not I wouldn't recommend Lucky Raspberry for your kind of normal Onslaught, at least in the early rounds, but especially in Legend and then higher tier normal and Legend, Lucky Raspberry, you're going to get your Arc Bolt back very fast, and the amount of ads really plays into your build here. Melee Disorienting melee class ability, you've got Gamblers, and then for exotic weapon, I already mentioned Queensbreaker, but Queensbreaker's just there as a kind of, it's not there for damage. Like, all memes aside, I am not bringing Queensbreaker in for damage. It's not there for DPS. It is there strictly because it's on-demand chaining blinds, and because you're up against a lot of combatants, there's going to be some mini bosses in there. There will be, if you're up against the Hive, you've got Unstoppable Ogres. Blind will deal with them. That is a counter towards Unstoppable. So that's the reason I'm recommending Queensbreaker. It's no memes here, no damage stuff. It's just there as a utility weapon. But if you're not using Queensbreaker, if you do have an Indebted Kindness with Volt Shot, if you pair that with Beacons, which is the Arc Fragment special ammo arc weapon kills, while amplified, create a blinding blast. And that's what I've been using quite a lot of the time. So a lot of the ads, they come in big kind of clumps. A lot of ads they're spawning in as a group, and if you can kill one of those thralls, it sends out a kind of, it's quite a moderate amount of blind in a blast, and you'll blind them all, and you can really control that the amount of ads that are approaching you. So I've been having a lot of fun with that. Pair that with Shock, which is arc grenades apply jolt, so you'll be applying jolt with your arc bolt. Ions to get ionic traces after you kill a jolted enemy, which plays into Lucky Raspberry because you can get extra energy for your arc bolt. Plus, the ionic traces give you melee and class ability on top of that. And then you can either have discharge, which is another ionic trace spawning fragment, which is arc weapon kills progress a counter, so higher targets just basically guarantee the ionic trace, whereas smaller tier rank and file, you may need to kill up to 3 of them to get ionic trace to spawn. Or you can use amplitude, which is the while amplified, scoring 2 kills or more, create an orb of power, and that does have a 10-second cooldown, so it really plays into the whole thing. If you've got legs, you've got surge armor mods in there, so you can get an increase to your arc damage, and then your Indebted Kindness is just going to go completely crazy with the amount of jolting and blinding, and its increased damage with the surges. So a lot going on here. In terms of specific mods, you've got Siphon the helmet with ashes to assets. You've got free picks in your arms. You can go for anything there. Again, free picks in your chest, ideally reserves. Indebted Kindness doesn't really suffer with problems to ammo economy, at least in my experience. So reserves might not be the pick here. You may want to just go for your standard resist mods. And again, surges in your legs with class Reaper and Bomber. So yeah, Arc Blind, I personally think is super underappreciated and underused elemental effect. It's much akin to suppression, which isn't as prevalent compared to Arc Blinds. But in Onslaught, it will do wonders at controlling ads. If you can get an Indebted Kindness with Volt Shot, you'll be dealing Jolt and Blind. And if not, you will have some great success with Delicate Tomb, Cold Heart, or another arc special. We mentioned earlier on with Iterative Loop with the Fusion Rifle. Another solid choice if you don't have it. You've got a lot of choices in terms of arc special. And yeah, Queensbreaker is very good just to really control the battlefield. If I know if I'm playing with Impetus and Saint in Onslaught, we might not necessarily need Queensbreaker. I'm just taking that in for maybe the first couple of rounds to see how the team are controlling the ads. But beyond that, probably not need that. But if I was going in with a kind of newer group, then I would definitely recommend something like Queensbreaker. Considering the amount of heavy ammo that drops, you can basically get a guaranteed heavy ammo box at least once every 10 rounds. Within that 10 round kind of quota, you're going to be fine for Queensbreaker ammo. It's fairly efficient. 2 classes here that I'm just going to very quickly summarize. I've already talked about Orpheus Rig Tether. Yeah, everyone else has been talking about Orpheus Rig Tether. I don't need to tell you what to put on that. It's very easy to just put on Orpheus Rig, put on Deadfall Tether, and you'll be getting your super back very fast. I don't need to go into any more details with Orpheus Rig Tether. Stasis subclass, I do have 2 builds here. It's the Frozen Battlefield build that I've talked about before in previous episodes. That's using the Agar Scepter with renewal graphs. Won't go into detail. All of the builds that I'm talking about here in this episode, I already have links in the Discord that Saint was mentioning earlier on. The more kind of risky Stasis build here, again, this is one that I've been having a lot of fun with, but it is very risky, and that is Shatter Dive, and I'm pairing that with Buried Bloodline. I know a lot of people may not have Buried Bloodline, but if you can proc the Devourer from Buried, then you'll have a much better kind of survivability when you're doing the Shatter Dive into your Glacial Crystals. It plays really well. I've been having a lot of fun with it, but I do want to really put the highlight that it is a risky build, especially in your Legend Onslaught and the high tier ones. I certainly wouldn't recommend using this, 40 wave and beyond. I would probably swap back to Void Tether if that's not already present. The last build that I'll talk about, I'll go into a little bit more detail, is Strand. I've not used a lot of Strand, at least in the last couple of months. Just I've kind of wanted to go back to the other builds with the news about Prismatic. I wanted to kind of really flesh out how I can play into Prismatic when it comes, and we can kind of play around with all the other elements. But I have used it a few times. and that is Strand Silk Strike with Grapple Melee, Thready Spike, and Gamblers. For exotic armor, it's really a free pick, but I do have Certarachne's Facade, which is the getting a woven mail when you're using your grapple melee. And for your exotic weapons, completely a free pick. You could go a little bit more kind of support oriented with the Navigator. Aspects, you've got Widow's Silk for the double grenades, and Whirling Maelstrom, which is my favourite aspect out of all the aspects in the game, where your Tango, when you destroy a Tango, it turns into that kind of Beyblade, let it rip. And you can pair that with Threads of Continuity, which is your kind of longer lasting strand debuffs, Propagation, which is on paired melee ability kill, you get Unravel rounds, so you can spread more Unravel kind of nanites everywhere. And now that applies to Thready Spike and the grapple melee. And then we've got Rebirth, which is strand weapon kills progress a counter, which spawn a variable number of threadlings. That's your kind of wild card. You can swap that out for anything else. And then you've got Fury, which is the dealing damage with Tango, which includes Swirling Maelstrom, because it's still a Tango at heart. It grants a varying amount of melee energy, so you can get your Thready Spike back faster. And obviously, Thready Spike's very good for ad dense content, because it's going to keep it goes from A to B to C with all the combatants, so chain between them, and you can get it back. Catch it, a perfect catch, you'll get a little bit more energy back when you catch it, and then Fury just kind of closes the gap, the loop in terms of getting your melee back faster. In terms of specific mods, Siphon, Hands on Your Helm. Arms, you've got Heavy-Handed and Impact Induction, and then free picks for chest and legs, and for class, it's Bomber. I don't have any specific weapons here. You can just go completely nuts. Whatever you fancy using, it'll work out, because it's more of an ability-focused build compared to, synergizing with your weapons. But as I mentioned, Navigator's pretty strong kind of support build. But again, it's another dungeon exotic. You might not already have that, so I'm not pushing you towards Navigator. It's just a good to have, a nice to have, but use whatever you want. Very fun builds. And like I said, all these builds that I've talked about for Hunter are on the Discord, for Massive Breakdowns Discord. And if you've got any questions with any of these, let me know. You can reach out to my socials. You can reach me out in-game or in the Discord as well. All right. Saint, what about our Titan friends? What are you recommending to take into some onslaughting?
I'm going to start off with some, just less conventional stuff, and then go back and recap some of my, the more like typical or known meta builds, because sometimes you just want to mix it up a little bit and have some fun. And, I'm always love to talk to other Titans and watch YouTube videos, some, other creators on builds they're putting out, and always trying them out for myself. So some of these are kind of like picking pieces of stuff. I think it was long-term patron Mr. Bryce Aroni that originally threw this idea for this first build out here, and then I kind of took that and started to tweak it for my own self, and man, he was cooking on this one, because it is become one of my favorites just for fun, and that is an Arc build, which, Arc Titan, not seen a lot of play, I feel like, in general in this activity, but there's something here. And specifically, that something is Buried Bloodline and Heart of Inmost Light. Despite what you may have heard by Heart of Inmost Light, it still is indeed a functioning piece of exotic armor and can be helpful in a build. And this build is mainly revolving around using Buried Bloodline to get Devour going, and then using just copious amounts of Pulse and Storm Grenades that are buffed by Touch of Thunder and Spark of Magnitude. And the amount of grenades that one is able to throw with this build is just obscene, especially when you're landing these Pulse Grenades, Storm Grenades, those two specifically, I say, because they're so good at controlling those groups of ads when they're spawning in Onslaught. If you land a grenade just right in the right spot, you can be wiping out whole groups of them and just keeping your Devour going for a really long time. Buried Bloodline, obviously benefiting from the anti-barrier sidearm, right? It's getting that surge. It's got Weaken. It's got Devour. You may not be able to get the extended Devour time you could get on a Void Titan build, which I'll talk about in just a moment here, but using Using Thunder Crash for our super, going with Pulsar Storm Grenade, and then Thunderclap is personal choice in the melee, but that's you can take that or leave it. And then I like to use Thruster with this. Thruster plays into that Heart of Inmost Light. You can also use some, mods here and there like Bolstering Detonation or Impact Induction to help Hoyle along a little bit, given that it's not quite as strong as it once was back in the original launch of Beyond Light there. But yeah, Buried Bloodline and Devour's easily going to help make up for anything that you feel like you lost from that original Hoyle Arc Titan build. And then for my other aspect, alongside Touch of Thunder, I'm taking Knockout. And then alongside Magnitude, which is giving me that longer arc grenade duration, I'm also going to take Shock if I'm using the Storm Grenades for Jolt on arc grenade hit, Resistance so that I can ensure that I'm not a detriment to the team, getting that extra 25% DR while surrounded, which is really helpful, especially if you're going to be using this in Legend. And then Ions, jolted targets create ionic traces on defeat, which is great for just even more grenade energy. I'm usually using, probably a Void Surge on this to help feed my Buried Bloodline, along with hand cannon, for unstop or an auto rifle, maybe for overload, depending on the enemy type that I'm going to get there, and the kinetic slot. And then, so some Void Surges there, Void Siphons, because we're not playing specifically onto our class. Ashes to Asset on my helmet to be getting extra Thunder Crash, regen on my grenade kills, because wow, are you going to be getting a lot of grenade kills? And then really my class item is, the Attraction mod I'm a huge fan of, as well as Reaper, because you're going to be using Thruster so much. And then probably a Dilation to round out my Void Surge, just to keep those up a little bit more. So if you have not been playing Arc Titan all season, I would highly recommend this. This is also almost entirely agnostic of seasonal mods. So really high odds that is going to be a viable build going into our major expansion, where we're going to be resetting artifact and all that stuff. You don't know what you're going to get. Hopefully we'll get some arc stuff, because if we do, that is going to be incredibly strong and it is very fun to play. Next, I wanted to hit on some Void builds. Again, kind of a little just off the path here for your typical Titan meta, which I would say these days is definitely Solar and Strand, which I'll just give quick recaps on the end here. But on our Void builds, you can also give a little bit of love to Hoyle, but I think that even more fun than that is Doomfang Pauldrons. Really not an exotic that I feel like sees a lot of play, and just has not been super popular, and I would say is really quite strong. Given the amount of time that you have on your super and stuff like that, it is really can be a potent exotic for fending off just waves and waves of enemies and the amount of uptime that you have there. On this build, now that we're on a full-on Void subclass, you've got a few different options for your weapon. You can use Graviton, which is going to be incredibly good with volatile rounds, which we'll be focusing on proccing on this build. You can also use Wave Splitter, absolute another favorite there as far as just Void weapons goes. Really strong, being an exotic and the buff that it's getting there. And then also Buried Bloodline. Buried Bloodline is nice in the Void setup because it does prevent you from having to select the Echo of Starvation, which is what is going to allow you to proc Devour when you are not playing on a Warlock. So, Graviton and your Wave Splitter are really good, just offensive Void options for when you're proccing volatile rounds. And then, Buried Bloodline, if you want to, free up your fragment slots a little bit and you don't want to be taking any stat negations. To build out, if I am going down the path here with my, Doomfang Pauldrons, I'm going to take Shield Throw. I'm going to take probably Rally Barricade, and also definitely Sentinel Shield Super, which is probably not something that you have selected. I liked Magnetic Grenade, but, Vortex, Void Wall, honestly fine. You could probably even get away with Void Spike, depending on which map you're playing Onslaught on. In the aspects, controlled demo and offensive bulwark for that ability regen and explosion for health regen for our allies, which is incredibly nice, as it's kind of more in line with a Precious Scars build that you may have been running over the past few weeks. On the fragments, we've got Cessation for volatile on finisher, persistence for the debuff duration, or buff duration, I should say, on ourselves when it comes to any kind of void buffs. Starvation for getting that Devour up if you are not using Buried Bloodline. You haven't landed one of those yet. Echo of Instability, defeating targets with grenades grants volatile rounds to your void weapons. If you're not picking Starvation, there's really a lot of, just kind of open there. If you want Reprisal for higher super uptime, you could have Remnants if you're running like a Void Wall or a Vortex Grenade or something like that. Yeah, I mean, pretty open there if you're not going that way. And then after that, we're really trying to just lean in on our Doomfangs, which are not only going to be giving us, the super buffs and the extra duration on Void Shield hit when you're in your super, but keep in mind that it's working like the classic Path of the Burning Steps mechanic, where you're getting an escalating bonus on your Void weapons as you get weapon and ability kills, which is really nice. And that brings up my kind of final part of this of I'm probably going to be using, Edge Transit for this. If I'm cranking up, getting a few minor kills or something like that, and then I'm able to swap over to Edge Transit and to just absolutely dump out some ammo there is going to be incredibly powerful, just really high DPS. You don't need to have volatile rounds up on your Edge Transit. If you do, it's just a bonus. And using that Void Grenade can also be good for getting that kicked off on your Doomfangs, that kind of Void buff chain going there. And then, mod side, there's a few things, running heavy-handed obviously is really nice, and hands-on for getting more super energy and orbs on your melee kills, going harmonic mods, pretty much other than that. And I like to run a special finisher with this if I'm running Buried Bloodline, or I'm going to be running Wave Splitter. I like to run special finisher just to ensure I can use that special weapon pretty much as a primary, and my primary mostly for just champ stunning outside of that. And for those purposes, running something like Elemental Charge can be nice if you're going to have Void debuffs picking up. And then just generally, Reaper is always good, and powerful attraction on the class items are always really, really nice. So yeah, if you've not been playing any Arc or Void Titan, I'll have links for these build house, just incredibly fun builds. As far as my go-to meta ones, I'll just say, Solar Titan with the Precious Scars and hot swap over to Pyrogale for the super is just been my absolute go-to, and it's probably what I would consider the easiest thing for going, on Legend 50 clears, almost guaranteed. You can just chow through that. Lot of hands-on and heavy-handed for my melee kills or consecration kills if I'm going that way. And then if I'm not going consecration, I'm going to be focused entirely on, making sure I'm using Benevolence, because Precious Scars is going to have my grenade cooldown really, really low, really like a thermite grenade on that one. And then, just using Xenophage. The last thing I'll say about the solar build real quick is just that when you're using Xenophage, if you're not aware of this, it is incredibly helpful and in your best interest to run just a one reserves mod and a scavenger mod. Harmonic reserves, harmonic scavenger is going to be really nice for helping ensure that you just get massive amounts of ammo from every brick that you pick up. And legendary primaries on that one got to be Zali's Bane and Scatter Signal for some champ dealing. That's pretty much Solar Titan. That build's pretty well known by now. And then you got Banner of War, little Navigator, Ikelo Shotgun, special ammo finisher, just grapple meleeing into everything under the sun. Don't think I really need to say much more about that. So it's it's your Titan stuff. I have some links, like I said, to those guys in the comments. And let's move on to our Warlock, Resident Warlock Impetus. What have you been running?
So I'll start with the obvious one here. Phoenix Protocol Warlock has definitely been probably the safest build to take into Onslaught, especially if you can stack 2 Warlocks with Phoenix Protocol and chain wells. The super energy gains are unreal especially when you get that second Solar Warlock, and it's also very helpful once you get to that final 10 waves, and depending on what the special enemies are that show up at that point, it can be a literal lifesaver. On the grenade side of that build, I've been running kind of a combination of healing and fusion, depending on what my other Solar Warlock is, or if I'm by myself as the lone well lock, I typically will do a healing grenade just to make sure that I have a bit more portable healing option for my teammates, not necessarily myself. Fusion grenade then is kind of like a damage option if there's another well lock on my team. Incinerator snap always for that fanning, so helpful in wave-based content. Definitely don't do your more PvP focused option here. And then a healing rift for the class ability. On the exotic weapon side, I've been using Sunshot. I think it's kind of silly to not use that, really. It is by far the best solar primary weapon in the game. Definitely the kind of exotic weapon of the season, I would dare say. You could swap this out for a few other things, though. Dragon's Breath would be a very viable option as well. I'm trying to think if there's anything else super solar related that would go just as hard. Yeah, I think on the exotic side, that would be my picks there. Really Sunshot or Dragon's Breath to tie into your solar verbs. On my aspect side, I am running Touch of Flame and Heat Rises. Hopefully that isn't too much of a surprise to anyone familiar with well-lock shenanigans. Icarus Dash not bringing a ton to the table for Onslaught. And then on my fragment side, I've got Ember of Torches for that powered melee attacks to make me and nearby allies radiant. Very helpful if I happen to be on a team where we don't have a ton of anti-barrier options prevalent. So I can kind of give us an emergency anti-barrier counter if a champion shows up and maybe our anti-barrier guy is dead or on the other side of the map taking care of something and they can't come over and help. I can just damage enemies with a powered melee, and then I have radiant for a little bit there. That's quite nice. Ember of Benevolence. So again, if I'm running a healing grenade, this is where this one ties into. Give me that increased ability energy when I apply Restoration and Cure to allies. Again, also does tie in a little bit to torches for... Oh, I'm looking at the wrong build. I do apologize, everyone. The joy of being a well-lock is I have four different loadouts related to... well, and I just realized I am reading out my Lunafaction fragments. Let's just scroll on down to, there's the Phoenix Protocol. Goodness sakes. Nerf well. Yeah, I'll say it. Nerf well. Stop having half my loadouts be one super, please, Bungie. All right, anyways, Phoenix Protocol, like I was saying, great exotic. Really, really great in Onslaught. Let's take a look at my fragments here. Discard everything related to the fragments that I was saying. This is the same. I'm still using the same abilities, same melee, same aspects, same grenade here. But Mercy, Ember of Mercy, let's start from the top here. When I revive an ally, gain restoration. Nearby allies also gain restoration. And then whenever I pick up a fire sprite, grant restoration. Again, tying this in here, well, I'll talk about tying it into weapons here with picking up a fire sprite, granting restoration. But again, when you're picking up an ally that's dying, getting restoration, especially if that's outside of a well, is very, very helpful. And I've also used it for the plus 10 resilience just to kind of help with my armor. Ember of Empyrean, solar weapon or ability final blows extend the duration of restoration and radiant effects. That ties into the Sunshot and the Dragon's Breath there being really nice, as well as my ability final blows. So in this case, I'd be using my powered melee or a fusion grenade to help with that. And then Ember of Searing, where defeating scorched targets grants melee energy and creates a fire sprite. Another way that I tie in Sunshot here, but also going back to Mercy, where picking up that fire sprite grants restoration. So that's why I run Searing. And then I think the one that probably surprises a few people is Ember of Tempering. I do actually run that. Again, this is probably going to be a little bit stronger here with Dragon's Breath, where the solar weapon final blows grant you and your allies increased recovery for a short duration, stacking up to 3 times. And then solar weapon final blows do also create a fire sprite while Ember of Tempering is active. So that is, again, I'm using it mostly for the benefit of ally increased recovery for a short duration. If we're standing in the well and there's a giant tormentor there, or the 2 shielded sky bombers, or the giant brig, or the giant ogre that we need to go take care of that's on the other side of the map. This is kind of where, those are the situations where I'm using tempering for that bonus, because The increased restoration does go out to 12.5 meters. So, if we're in a well and enemies need to step out to go take care of things, go finish an enemy whatsoever, there's still a pretty large radius where that will affect them, even if they're not standing in the well. It also lasts 8 seconds. So that's a nice long time too for my allies. Again, this is me just really leaning into a support build with Phoenix Protocol. I'm here to get as many Well of Radiances as possible. With these fragments, that can really work well with something like Sunshot, where I'm just mowing through enemies, applying a lot of Scorch and of course, a series of explosions rapidly, or I'm using Dragon's Breath to kind of create a trail of fire in a path where I know a lot of enemies are going to walk across while I'm mowing down a high health target that's in the distance. As far as the mods go, I don't have a lot of specific options. I think ability regeneration is very nice, but also I think the one essential mod would be Solar Siphon. Generate a ton of orbs of power with either Sunshot or Dragon's Breath. Go crazy. But you don't need to worry about stuff like Ashes to Assets or any of your super-based mods, because that is where Phoenix Protocol, that's the whole point of Phoenix Protocol. That's to really shine there. So if you want to focus on Solar Siphon, get a lot of orbs generated, and then have some mods related to orbs to get your grenade back, that's fine. Again, with Healing Grenade, I would probably focus a little bit more on your grenade-related mods to get that Healing Grenade back faster, so that you can throw out a Healing Grenade at your allies. Say if they need to go stand in a mine and it's a little bit farther away, or they need to go stand in a certain pool to break some shields, stuff like that. I think the biggest part of this build is knowing when to place the well down, knowing what points are okay. Typically, you don't want to put the well inside the battery, because you will have tons of enemies that will come towards you, especially once you start shooting them. You don't want to draw them into the battery, because that starts to damage it. So you want to do it just outside of the battery, maybe where kind of the border of your well and the battery's radius are touching a little bit, so that you can draw enemies away. At the same time, you also don't want to put your well down next to like Shaxes or any of your decoys, because that will also draw enemies to them, and then they might start damaging the decoy. The decoy is really there when you cannot kill the enemy and you need a bit of a breather to either reload your weapon or gear up to kill the enemies, right? That's how we want to be safe about this. I think the best places to put down a well would be right outside the battery, and then if you have any specific areas that you and your fire team need to stand in order to deal damage to bosses, either in the boss room or when you're out in the main play space, to bring down mines or immune special shielded enemies, that is. So that is my kind of Well of Radiance 101 in Onslaught. Again, this is a very strong build when you have a second Phoenix Protocol, but this is also quite strong when you have any other combination. It doesn't have to be with a second Phoenix Protocol Warlock, but I think if you're trying to go for that Legend Wave 50 clear for the first time, and this is not something that you're very familiar with, this kind of content, having 2 Phoenix Protocol Warlocks is probably the safest for your general odds as an average PvE player. That would be my recommendation, but you do not need to have a well to do it. You would probably want to really think about your healing at that point. I would heavily encourage weapons with heal clip at that point if you know that you're not going to be with a well warlock. Also prioritize just any solar builds at that point, maybe to get access to your healing grenade. But again, I think a lot of warlocks, probably if you're using LFG, you know what's going to be expected of you. You're already on well. You've already got one of your 5 Well of Radiance builds already selected from your loadouts going into that LFG. The other 2 builds I have are probably for somebody that's in maybe an entire fire team, or maybe you're just looking to have fun in the non-legend version, or you're actually very skilled and you're looking to be a little bit more aggressive and actually start spawn camping enemies as they come in, regardless of the difficulty. So I'll go in alphabetical order here. I do have an arc build. Kind of, we're working with the same underlying idea of how can we make use of the spark of beacons, that one fragment where arc special weapon final blows create a blinding explosion. Thankfully with warlocks, we have a really obvious candidate in Coldheart to bring that to light, but of course Indebted Kindness is going to be fantastic for this as well. My arc build here is just the one that I've talked about in previous episodes with Crown of Tempest and Coldheart. Just really, sorry, not Crown of Tempest, I apologize, the Fallen Sunstar and Coldheart for generating a ton of Ionic Traces for ability energy, but then also creating a blinding explosion. Beacons really does shine in here because we have so many aggressive enemies and also enemies that you don't want to get close to you. Stuff like the Cursed Thrall Wave or the Exploding Shanks in particular, the Marauders that come up. You want to blind them to stop their advance as quickly as possible. And you want a weapon where if you miss a couple of shots, it's not the end of the world. Indebted Kindness, you can miss your shots, you do have to worry about it, but it has a ton of ammo, so it's pretty forgiving. But far and away the most forgiving arc special weapon for this would be a Trace Rifle. It would be Cold Heart, right? You can fire 1,000 bullets per minute and really tag enemies and then get that kill, and then you get the blinding explosion and then keep going to town on those enemies once they're now stopped and blinded for a few seconds, while also generating ionic traces. And if you are playing with another Well Warlock, when you get those ionic traces to you, any of your nearby allies also do start to gain some of that ability energy. So it is also supporting a little bit, in a way, but not, of course, quite as supporting as a Well Warlock. So for the super of this arc build, Chaos Reach is probably the best play here. The biggest problem with the arc, of course, is that we don't have anything that's really great for high health targets. We don't have a burst option. Chaos Reach has been brought back down to Earth over time. It used to be quite strong, but now, while it does do that excellent jolt over the course of the duration, it leaves you in your super quite vulnerable. And so you need to be very strategic with when you choose to cast this. Probably want to be a little bit close to a wall so that you can stop casting Chaos Reach and then immediately get behind target once a high health boss enemy starts focusing on you. And of course, Arc in general just does not have easy healing access. So Chaos Reach for bursting down high health targets, or at least contributing to bursting down, but it's not going to be enough on its own, and you just need to be aware of that. As for our grenade, I've got Storm Grenade. Melee, I've gone with Chain Lightning. Again, it's kind of a last-ditch option. Obviously, you don't want to Chain Lightning the Cursed Thrall or the Exploding Shanks. You will lose that 1v1 or that 1v5. Healing Rift as our lone source of healing for a non-solar Warlock option here. Fallen Sunstar for the exotic armor, Cold Heart again for the exotic weapon. Really just, we're about generating ionic traces and making sure that we can just keep throwing out storm grenades and keep using chain lightning on targets that aren't going to kill us in return. Aspects, Arc Soul, Electrostatic Mind here. Arc Soul is going to be really great. Again, when you throw down that Healing Rift, have your allies run through that. Those will be very helpful for kind of shooting and alerting you to targets once they start firing at something there. And it's just nice to have passive damage in the background. And then, of course, we've got our fragments. Beacons I've already talked about here. I've got Shock here to give my grenade the jolting ability. That's going to be really nice as well, just for keeping constant damage up. The nice thing there, of course, is that it ties into Electrostatic Mind, our aspect. We're defeating targets with arc abilities or getting the jolted targets, creating that ionic trace. So we're helping ourselves out here. And then the Fallen Sunstar is boosting the quality of that ionic trace. But when we do pick it up, we are also amplified. So that ties into beacons, where now that we're amplified, our final blows with Cold Heart will make enemies, will blind enemies in an explosion there. And then my final two, of course, are Magnitude and Amplitude. So Amplitude, defeating enemies when I'm amplified, creates an Orb of Power. Pretty self-explanatory for the uses of Orb of Power. And then Magnitude, where my Storm Grenade has an extended duration to really lock down and go in on that crowd control fantasy, which is what this build is for. So this is, again, helpful for a more aggressive playstyle, but you need to be comfortable with very little healing. And you're not going to have the ability to really go 1v1 with some of those higher health targets once they show up. So this is probably, you're going to be running around, kind of going from place to place, spawn point from spawn point, dropping rifts for your allies so that they can run through and grab an Arc Soul, and then using your own abilities in a constant feedback loop with Cold Heart to blind and then kill a lot of the enemies that are spawning in. So that's the Arc build in a nutshell. I think the safer other option that's not solar would be Stasis. We're using Osmomancy Gloves here. Talked about these a lot for various options. This is crowd control. Again, for putting down the turrets and trapping and being aggressive, but you can kind of be off on a different side of the map while your turrets are up and taking care of things. So it's you can be aggressive in where you place your turrets, but then you can be a little bit safer taking cover elsewhere, focusing on stuff. For the exotic weapons, you can either run Augur Scepter, but I think Winter's Wrath Super is quite strong in Onslaught. So maybe if you don't want to sacrifice your super for the powered up mode in Augur Scepter, you can run Wicked Implement so that you can take care of enemies at a long distance. Maybe if you're in Moth Yards or if you're in the Midtown area and you're in that worst spawn point, I think it's over by, is it A or C flag? I can't ever remember, but the one where you have a long line of sight while you're also by the water. That can be another place, but I think Wicked Implement would also really shine, of course, in Vostok. Now that I think about it, there's some very long sight lanes there too, so you've got some slow options on the weapon front, but if you don't even want to run an exotic weapon, Osmiomancy Gloves will be just fine for giving you that extra turret plus the juiced Cold Snap grenades. So Cold Snap, of course, because we have to for Osmiomancy, we've only got the one melee option. Healing Rift, again, just for our kind of one source of healing. And then our two aspects, Bleak Watcher, go figure, and Glacial Harvest for our shards. And looking at my fragments here, I think a lot of this is just tied to shards and making the most of shards, which is why I put Wicked Implement on there, of course. We've got Whisper of Torment, where we gain grenade energy each time we take damage from targets. Again, with Osmiomancy, that one just makes sense. We've got Conduction, where the nearby stasis shards track to your position. Very, very helpful. If you are running Wicked Implement, that's going to help with reloading your weapon over time and also getting to that overflow. Once we do get that stasis shard, Whisper of Rhyme will kick in, and we do get a small amount of overshield. It's not a lot. It's quite paltry, but any bit of overshield will help when it comes to taking damage or preventing you from dying. So that is why I run Rhyme. And then finally, Whisper of Durance, where the slow that our turrets are providing lasts longer. So that is extremely helpful for making sure the turrets are extra lethal here. As far as your mods go, really just lean into the grenade stuff. I think I've run, let's see here, I've got Kickstart on here is quite nice as well for collecting Orb of Power to get my armor charges up and then getting grenade energy in return for those charges. I do also have Bolstering Detonation, where I get my Rift back a lot quicker whenever I deal damage with a grenade. That is quite nice. Again, Healing Rift is your lone piece of healing on this build, so this is more for people that are quite comfortable in Onslaught without healing, without having a well, and are really focused on being aggressive with crowd control. And let's see. If you are struggling with either the Arc or the Stasis one, you could probably put in some of your leg armor mods with picking up health from an Orb of Power like Better Already or Recuperation if you're finding that to be an option. That's kind of the trade-off that I do make on my leg armor anyways if I know I'm not running a solar heavy build, is to have Recuperation and Better Already there and then just make sure that I have a Siphon mod. Stasis Siphon would be a very, very safe pick if you are committed to using Augur Scepter or Wicked Implement. But those are the three builds that I've been rocking here. We've got a bit of kind of good to know or general information about Onslaught. You do have all three champions present. Again, the two races that we face are Fallen and Hive, but both of those have barrier champions. So barrier is by far the most common one. The most deadly champion by far is the Overload Captain. The teleporting can ruin runs. It will appear, and then next thing you know, it's standing next to your battery, blasting you in the back. So you absolutely want to make sure that you can take care of that champion quickly. Stasis can be quite nice with applying slow, either with an ability or a weapon. Hive with the Barrier and the Unstoppable combination can be quite safe as well. Again, Barrier Knights and Unstoppable Ogres are not very fast. They don't teleport. They can get telegraphed pretty safely there. Unstoppable Ogre in particular is so slow. I don't think we've ever had a lot of problems unless you didn't know there was an Unstoppable Ogre on the field and you came around the corner and got turned into pulp immediately with that slam. Obviously, the boss arena comes around every 10 waves. I don't think there's any bosses in particular that really you need to be worried about. I think what will really be the big threat in there would be the ads that spawn. You don't want the ads to stack up and overwhelm you while you're focusing on the boss. Again, In some of those earlier waves, you can kind of just sit in a well and cook. But once you get to, I'd say, the wave 39, the wave 49 bosses, you do need to be safe there. You do need to be ready for the ads to kind of creep up on you and be aware of that. So if you need to step back and retreat to focus on ads while the boss is at the back of the room, do so. The bonus objectives in the boss room, the shielded enemies, the rifting for extra damage and reinforcements can be very helpful. It's a nice bonus, though. You don't have to do it, but especially in those higher ones, that can be really safe as well. Court, when it comes to the Wave 50 boss, are there any specific recommendations that we have?
Well, be careful is the big the play here. I'm not even memeing here, because all three of the bosses that you get in Wave 50 are highly aggressive. Like, we are talking up in your grill and stabbing you in your face, because the Fallen boss does it. I think that's the one that a lot of us have been seeing very recently. I think there was a little bit of a bug with the rotation where the Tormentor and the Hive boss weren't getting put into the rotation. But the Hive one does that as well. The Hive Ogre will come up and just slam you. And the Tormentor boss as well, when you get that, is the same deal. So all three of these bosses are going to get right up into your comfort zone, and it'll turn it very uncomfortable for you. So like, using your healing rifts, using your healing capabilities, Well of Radiance might not quite be the play. It can be a safety net, but when that boss is getting right up into your safety net, and you've got a bunch of ads that are spawning in, and it's that kind of just a lot of ads are spawning, you're not controlling the ads, then you can just completely wipe. It's not, I don't personally think the Wave 50 boss is terribly difficult, because I think they've got quite low HP comparably to the bosses that spawn at 10 through 40. But it can just be, it can snowball. That's the big issue here when it comes to the 50 wave bosses. So a lot of movement, a lot of communication with your squads. Just make sure where you're calling out and where you're going and who's doing what. Have at least one person, if you've got a tether hunter, or if you've got a stasis warlock or some sort of roaming titan, just to clear out the ads, and then you can focus on the boss, because the boss can be kited around. They're not too deadly if you're just kind of keeping them at bay. But yeah, really, it's the opposite to they've heard our cries, our particular cries of having, we're up on a pedestal and we're firing at a boss who's also at a pedestal. It's the inverse to that. It's the rogue treatment, where you're going to get slammed quite a lot here. But movement is really the big key here. Saint, you got any kind of tips when it comes to the 50 wave boss or the other bosses or champions?
Yeah, when it's come to the 50 wave boss, especially the Tormentor, I've been running solar, or whatever it is. I'm not using my super anymore to try to just run in there and pyrogale the boss, because that's just not really a good idea. Just stay on the regular version of the super, clear out some ads, and then I've just been using Leviathan's Breath. Man, does Leviathan's Breath just absolutely mince up these Tormentors. You don't want to do that. LFR's obviously really good. Sniper rifles, always good. Just be sure that, like Court said, you're not overly focusing in on the boss, and you're able to move around a little bit. Because if one of these bosses starts charging you, jump behind the next piece of cover, rotate around to the sides, clear out some ads, whatever it is. Just don't stand there scoped in on the thing and then you get stomped into a wall or off a cliff and die, because it's just a silly and pretty easy way to die, honestly. But yeah, big shout out to Forerunner and to Leviathan's Breath for absolutely cooking the Tormentor. I don't know. That's about it. Just don't try to only focus too much on the boss if you need to move and use those sides to clear out some ads, like we talked about there. It's really, the boss is not a sane amount of health, and you're not going to need to focus on that too much.
Okay, we do have some special enemies / augmentations, as they call it in game, that we'd like to call out. I'll cover a few of these. So these all spawn during waves ending in 3 or 9. You'll see them. They are the kind of the kind of mini boss wave. They're like the in between the in between of the boss waves. So these are here to really put a wrench into your the gears and just completely ruin your run. Specifically, the number one here that we've put at the top of the list, and that is your big boss tier demolitionists. So it's your giant knights for Hive and the big captains, the fallen captains for Fallen. Sorry, so they spawn pretty much on top of the ADU nearby, and really you have to get rid of them ASAP because they can cause havoc. All these bosses spawn with ads as well. It's not just going to be these bosses as you've seen. So you need to burst these big guys down ASAP. So, that's why we're talking like 1k voices is very good. Leviathan's Breath, you can keep that rolling with the Catalyst. Xenophage, Galahorn with rockets, stuff like that can really burst down. You've got your supers, as we've been talking about as well through our build recommendations. So these are your top tier you have to get rid of. Next up is a little bit kind of a relax Sky Bombers. It's your 3 roaming mini bosses. So for Hive, it's it's the knights, and for Fallen, it's the captains. And these are mini bosses, so you can crowd control them. It's got pretty low HP anyway, but you do want to deal with them ASAP. So at least 1 or 2 people kind of scout out. They will be highlighted on your map, and to get rid of them ASAP, because if you leave them, they will start calling down the artillery barrage on the ADU, which does do a lot of damage, especially in Legend and in higher tier waves. And again, these are spread around the map. The ones that are not spread around the map, and they will come beelining to your ADU, is the shielded mini-boss demolitionists. So you will need to stand in the sort of resonance rift to deal with their shields. And again, they normally spawn with a lot of ads, so you need to focus on them. You need to really communicate with your team. This is the big kind of communication key, is to say, like Impetus saying, right, we're going to need to focus on these guys because they can snowball and they can ruin your run. A lot of ads will be spawning in, and they can just be a really pain to deal with. Up next, that is a potential pain to deal with, Saint, is the deactivate the mines.
Yeah, so when it comes to dealing with these bosses, again, you're going to want to overly focus on the mechanics and not overly focus on the DPS, because it is way more important that you're moving in and taking out these objectives and not worrying about protecting the ADU as much, as long as you're leaving maybe one person behind. I would say the second thing I'll say is don't immediately rush over there, though, because you have like 45 or 50 seconds to disable these things. So take your time. Just make sure that as soon as it pops up, you're having at least 2 of your players start moving that direction, not necessarily just running in there and dying, because it's way better if you can take your time clearing some ads out and then kind of slowly moving in. As soon as the mine starts, making your way there, you'll have plenty of time to diffuse it, and then you can meet back up with your other player on the ADU for the increased defense there. I think other than that, it's, we got our mix of Sky Bombers, right? Your shielded Sky Bomber, and probably your most annoying one that you're gonna have to deal with. And again, I would say sending 2 players is been my usual thing here. You've got your massive Brig, and then your massive Ogre, depending on which enemy type that you've got. You've got a Resonance Rift to deal with the shield, which is going to be quite chunky. And then, even after that, they have pretty big health pool in general. I think having some kind of, burst super for this, if I'm playing on Solar Titan, I'm definitely going to just pop a Pyro Gale here and go for a smack on the enemy as soon as I can to start burning that down, especially the Brig, because you need to get that shield off to where you can use whatever else it is you got on you. But don't be afraid to dump some supers and some heavy ammo on these guys, especially in the higher rounds. They're really chunky, and you should not just be using like your special weapon here or grenades. You need to pretty much dump everything you got to make sure you take care of them quickly. Also, to make sure that the 2 of you that are headed over there are not leaving your 3rd player on the ADU, for too long. Just absolutely hang in there. It's going to be tough, but they can hang in there for just a second while you guys burn down the shielded Sky Bomber.
It's a fine balance because it's a sky bomber, you have to take care of it ASAP. Because if you leave the sky bomber up, it's the same thing with the roaming mini bosses, which are much easier to deal with. You've got he'll just keep triggering the orbital blast that rains hellfire on the ADU. So it is this kind of fine balance of, if I'm the Void Hunter, I'm going to leave a tether at the ADU for my resident warlock Impetus here, who's got as well. He'll protect the ADU. I'm going over with Saint to deal with this shielded sky bomber. So that there is a lot of kind of overlap, and like, again, this is another reason why like communication is key, especially in the higher rounds. You know, you could get a sky bomber at wave 49 and that will completely ruin your run. So it's it can be tricky. You know, that's certainly something that Impetus and I had to deal with quite a few times. Always favored the fallen brig.
The worst enemy I've ever fought in Destiny.
It's got 1,000,000 HP, of course. You know, before you break its shield off, right?
Before the crit shows up. Yeah. Holy cow.
Yeah. Yeah, other than that, it's Tormentor.
Just a Tormentor.
Yeah. Impetus, you go ahead.
Yeah, I think the unfortunate truth of the Tormentor is you need to have one person really kite the Tormentor away from the ADU. If you are unlucky enough to have the Tormentor show up in the final 10 waves, at that point in time, you want to have multiple Shaxx decoys up, and the Tormentor will go after them. But if you deal enough damage to the Tormentor, it will absolutely turn its aggro away from the decoy and come after you. That's a good thing. You want to work that to your advantage. The person that should be dealing a lot of damage, popping those shoulders, should be the one that's comfortable with having the Tormentor, aggro on them, take their aggro, and then you lead them off on a wild goose chase around the map. You have ads, right? And that's the problem too, is it's not just the Tormentor, it's also the ads that will show up and beam you while you're getting suppressed out your super against the Tormentor, while you're getting that slam damage that you need to worry about. The Tormentor is fast, so getting the Tormentor away from the ADU so that the rest of the team can focus down the ads and then come and deal with the Tormentor is the play. And that puts a lot of pressure on one person, and I think that's kind of one of the things that we've realized as we've been doing our legend runs, is especially if we're taking someone through that hasn't done the 50 wave, is saying, look, there's going to be a time when the Tormentor shows up, you got to just get it away from the ADU. And maybe you aren't the one that's going to be dealing a lot of damage, but you have its aggro, and you need to make that work. You need to save us by taking it away from the battery. So you do need to be ready for that. I think on the normal version of Onslaught, it's not too terrifying, but definitely in the legend version, you just got to suck it up and be the one that goes 1v1 with the boss tier Tormentor. Again, you can run away. You don't have to deal a ton of damage, but you want to keep that aggro so that it gets far enough away, or you can lead it to a decoy is really the play here. But it will rip through decoys quite quickly, especially in those final 10 waves. So that's just the unfortunate reality. I still don't think it's too scary, honestly. Once you pop the shields, once you start focusing the shoulders, once you start focusing on that chest as a team, it can be quite doable, provided that all three of you are pretty spread out and you're comfortably away from the ADU so that the enemy AI doesn't quite know who to go for, right? That's when it's the most manageable. But at the start there, especially if it does, because it does spawn in right outside the battery, you have to just take its aggro. All of you should be competing to take its aggro, and then once it locks in, that person needs to run for their lives. So those are your special enemies. They spawn in during the waves ending in 3 or 9, again, very important. So you do have a way to plan for them. They do go through a rotation. You will face all 6 of them. And then a few of them will, of course, repeat in the final. I should say the later waves, because there are multiple times these will come up here. You'll face all of them at least 2 times. Some of them you will face 3 times over the course of a 50 wave run is a way to think about it. So if the Tormentor and the big shielded Sky Bomber show up a little bit later on in the run for the first time, you know you're not getting them the 3rd time, so that is some consolation. Of course, you will have to deal with them The second time, once it's pretty high up there, and that's not fun, but you will only have to face those kinds of enemies twice if they don't show up immediately. If those are one of the first things that you're facing when you do get to that wave 3 or that wave 9, you need to be ready that you're going to be seeing them 3 times, and that the third time will be in the worst phase. So that's just the call that your fire team will have to make if you want to guardian it up and get through it, or go to orbit and see if you can get lucky with something else here. But I know that the 3 of us are sick and tired of the Fallen, and definitely try to prioritize the Hive when we're going for a full Legend 50 clear. I think on the non-Legend difficulty of Onslaught, I just typically, because that has matchmaking, I'll go in and just bang out 50 waves regardless of what enemy that I'm dealing with. But the Fallen do take some years off of your lifespan on Legend difficulty. They are so annoying, between the lack of a critical spot, the Brig having more health than most of the raid bosses that we've ever faced. I mean, yeah, it's tough, Dan. That big shielded Sky Bomber Brig is way too much. Way too much. We have here in the notes kind of what times teams can expect to complete on the difficulties. I think it's the same time, though, because the waves are timed as far as when the enemy spawns in. You're looking at an hour, I think, regardless of the difficulty. I guess really the one thing that can add on to time is like if you get a Tormentor in the 40th wave and you've cleared all the ads, and then that's the last enemy you got to kill to progress it. That can take some time. Or the big shielded Sky Bomber is the last enemy alive. But yeah, for the most part, I don't think you can get under an hour on the Legend difficulty, unless I'm wrong. Obviously, again, the boss rooms do come into it. I guess if you can really melt the boss rooms, maybe you can get under an hour, but it seems like the full 50 wave run will be at least an hour and can go quite a few minutes beyond that, but not up to like 90 minutes, I don't believe.
Yeah, the good thing is that you can take a break between the major kind of at 5 or 10 rounds. So after you've done the midpoint or the boss wave. So before you go back into the portal, you can freely stand there. You can go idle for a little bit. Just keep moving your mouse or your controller pad for a little bit if you just need to take a small break. So you're not timed between there's no like maximum time. Like you have to leave by 1.5 hours. So in terms of like what's our kind of, because we've done quite a lot of Onslaught over the last couple of weeks, so I think we can wrap this episode up with our kind of final thoughts. I think we're starting to wind down in terms of onslaughting. So I'll kick us off. I think this has been a nice refreshing activity to really like test our ad clearing or kind of dense kind of build crafting. I've certainly like had to really go back and tweak with my builds just to really flesh them out for Onslaught. But may Onslaught itself or a similar activity in the future continue. I think this is definitely the most fun I've had in terms of, we've come out a long way from doing, it's not a fair comparison, but going from Shattered Throne, where there's maybe like you'll meet 20 ads during the entirety of the dungeon, and then in this Onslaught you'll have 20 ads plus 50 more in one wave of Onslaught. So it's been refreshing content. Obviously, originally we were not supposed to get this, because we would have been playing the final shape, and that particular year probably almost we could have been talking about episode 2 by this point if it originally came out. Yeah, because we're a few months after the original release date for the final shape. But I'm not. I suppose I don't want to say I'm glad that we got it, because obviously I would have loved to have done the final shape on the original release date, but this type of filler content, with it being free, and we're seeing a lot of these refreshed weapons come back, it's been a nice little kind of, okay, go nuts and then take a little break, which is what I think all three of us will probably be doing for the next couple of weeks until the final shape launches, and then we can get back into Destiny and just go nuts again. So it's been fun. It's been a lot of fun, and I want to see more Onslaught. I hope the reason I want like Onslaught to keep iterating is because I want to see them in more PvP maps. I think them taking PvP maps and then PvEing them, slight changes in terms of environment, slight changes to like how the maps actually flow. But I'd love to see more maps in Onslaught if that's a potential thing in the future. So, Saint, what's your final thoughts for Onslaught?
Yeah, I've really been enjoying it, and it feels like just such a great way to test builds, and the coil was too, but these weapons are just so insanely good, and it's like something I want to grind. It's even more engaging in terms of difficulty and less like, the coil is kind of this mix of like increasing difficulty combat and also like navigating areas and little puzzles and things like that, just trying to hit all the plates and stuff, versus this activity is kind of hitting some similar things, but it's just straight combat. Right. And there's a little traversal and stuff, but it's really focused on combat. So similar kind of a thing, but the difficulty's ramping up even more on Legend than your kind of base coil. And yeah, what a great place to like get some loot, test some builds, and just like have some fun. Would be really sad if we never got this, to be honest with you. I'm totally cool with the delay. More wave-based combat modes and stuff. Yeah, no complaints here. I'm stoked that I finally had more time to grind. I've still got that auto-loading holster mountaintop just absolutely eludes me. Gonna be going hard after that this next week or so.
Yeah, I'm excited to have a horde mode finally in Destiny 2. I think this is a great iteration of the horde mode too. It's fun to play. It fits within Destiny. I'm happy to have it. Of course, the loot is engaging, and yeah, the retuning of the PvP maps to have a PvE point of view is quite nice as well. I do like that. As I didn't need brand new maps necessarily. I think having stuff that I've been through before, but with a bit of a twist, is quite nice. I think the one thing that I'd complain about is the lack of other enemy races. Like Taken, I think would be the one that I'd probably want the most, to be completely honest. Vex, I don't want to go up against a Wyvern, really, ever. Lucent Hive, I would probably rather eat nails or glass than go up against another Void Titan, really. And Scorn, I just, really the worst possible, horrible, really. I can't imagine having to go up against Screebs, in a wave 40 environment here. So, and the Dread I haven't played against, but I can say right now, without having faced them, I would totally go up against the Dread in Onslaught. That would be a very fun environment. But yeah, I do hope that they keep Onslaught and or at least give us another horde mode if they don't want to keep iterating on Onslaught, because it is quite fun to go in and just grind one out for 50 waves with the boys, go crazy with it, kill a lot of enemies. That is a fun fantasy. That feels like a quintessential Destiny fantasy. So I am loving Into the Light for that.
Yeah, it gives me Reckoning vibes, which is weird to say for those that played through Reckoning. I know, Saint, you played through Reckoning, your fair amount of Reckoning back in the day, but it does give me that vibe. But it's a very different experience. We're not all, it's very useful to have Welly Radiance. It's very useful to have Tether, but it's not like the ultimate supers. You don't necessarily need to have them up all the time. But the reason why I'm saying it's given me that kind of Reckoning vibe is because I can remember during Reckoning just the sheer amount of ads that were spawning, and you had to really keep on top of that. So it's the same experience related to Reckoning. I don't want to go back to Reckoning. I don't want to go on that thin bridge, getting booked around by Taken Blights and Phalanxes, but I definitely share the same sentiment as Impetus, where I'd love to see Taken, maybe Vex as well, but definitely Taken if we were to get a new enemy race on Onslaught. And just want to really highlight that I'd love for them to just keep iterating on Onslaught. That's like the foundation. It's like, great, and then they can just keep cycling out weapons. It's sure a lot more interesting than some of the strikes that we have in the game, but I shall leave it at that. All right, lads, any final thoughts?
This is sticking around. Is it going to be playable immediately, or is it going away and then will debut a little bit after the final shape? I can't remember what they've said.
It's sticking around, but then there's like we're losing some of the mechanics that are associated basically with the I don't know, the Hall of Champions.
So the hall's going away, right? And the shinies
Hall of Champions is going
dropping.
away. Super Black will be away for a little bit, but it'll come back as its own quest line thing. And then also the shiny versions are going away. So after the final shape, Onslaught will be available. You can go and do it, and I'm pretty sure you can do the legend mode as well. But you won't get any shinies. It'll just be the normal versions. There'll be no double perk drops. I mean, a lot of us will be playing the new content, but I certainly want to play some prismatic subclass and kind of test out those builds, really flex those muscles. And I think Onslaught will be the best place to do that, rather than, say, a strike. But yeah, looking forward to it. And let's close out this week's show, lads. So that is episode 104. Of course, I want to thank our audio engineer Autodidactos, including our various patrons and sponsors over on the Massive Breakdowns Patreon. And great experience, some great builds in here. As we mentioned during the build segment, we'll have some links to some of these builds. Most of them should be up on the Massive Breakdowns Discord server as well. And if you've got any questions, let us know. We can help you out on anything related to the subclass kind of build crafting, theory crafting. And if you've got any questions you want to ask about Onslaught, because we've done plenty of those, hit us up on our socials, which we'll talk about them right now. So yeah, you can find me over on various social media as Court Projects. You can find my infographics and spreadsheet over in the Destiny 2 spreadsheets link tree, which you'll also find documentation and links to various other applications and docs to help and enhance your Destiny experience. And you can find me in game onslaughting my head off to get some more Luna's Howls. Impetus, where can we find you?
My name is Impetus. You can find me by that name in Discord and in Destiny, where I will be pantheoning, onslaughting, and bountying in preparation for the final shape. Saint, where can we find you?
My name is Sink Beer. You can find me by that name on Twitter, the Massive Breakdowns Discord and game, and maybe even streaming some Onslaught runs with these guys over on the Massive Breakdowns YouTube channel if you want to check in on that. Also, I've been talking with a buddy recently who's about to get back into the game after playing for about 5 hours 3 years ago for the only time ever. So I'm really excited to be spending some time with him as he kind of stumbles back into 3 massive years of content and completely new systems that he doesn't understand at all. So looking forward to that.
Stumble is a very good word.
Thanks for listening to another episode of PvE. We will see you guys next time.